welcome to the September 14th, 2017 episode of Reactive Consciousness, our in-depth podcast about what happened this week in our lives. I am your host, VyseTheBold, and this is...
Lotus Prince.
And OldManStompy.
Well, we have quite a few personal adventures that we went on this week. Can you guys start by telling the audience what you did this week?
Yeah, I kind of want to open this one because OldManStompy and I were both in on this, but the way I got involved, I think, was kind of funny. See, what had happened was there was this video game convention this weekend called a Video Game Con, and I kind of wanted to go. I've gone the last 2 years. It's like a small con in like part of a school, but it's got a pretty sweet dealer's room. I was kind of interested in going, so I asked Vyse if he could go. But he was burned out from having just come back from Florida, and he's like, I just want to, get work done around the house and kind of just unwind. So I was like, all right. So I asked Mr. Ryu, who had himself just come back from Japan, and he said, like, he wasn't really feeling it, number one, just because, but number two, it's a convention, right? So it costs like $30 to get in, which is not extremely high as far as convention prices go, but when you just went on vacation and did extravagant spending, the last thing you want to do is more frivolous spending, like as soon as you come back, and it's like an hour away anyway, and he was just going to go to play video games. Like, I was going to go for the dealer's room, but, he was like, I could play video games at home, so I was like, all right. So I didn't, I wanted to go to the con, but not quite enough to drive, like, an hour by myself and just kind of hang out there for like maybe an hour or two, so I was just like, I'm gonna stay in today. And Mr. Ryu was like, and I'm also not going because I'm gonna be hanging out with OldManStompy and Minty Mitts, and we're gonna go like picking like fruit, like pears at this orchard. So I was like, okay, well, you know what, you have fun. So I was like, I'm gonna stay in today. So I was just chilling at my place for like an hour, and I'm still in my pajamas because I'm like, this is a do nothing day. I'm just relaxing. I'm browsing like Facebook and Reddit. So all of a sudden my phone rings, which is a very rare thing on a Sunday. If my phone's going to ring at all, it's either going to be because Vyse is calling me because he's on the way home from work and he's chatting up in the car or something, or maybe it's like my job at the tutoring center, like, can you come in today? Like, if I hear my phone vibrate at all, it's like a text about work or like probably Vyse calling. So for a phone to ring on a Sunday,
we have talked about this before, that we have we're like largely a circle of introverts, and the only person among us who like randomly calls people to talk is Vyse.
Yeah.
which is totally fine, because otherwise there'll be like no glue that kept the circle of friends together.
Yeah, it does keep things interesting, because usually we just text, like, are we good to hang out? Yes, no. But so like Vyse calls to actually talk. So my phone...
I do that because a lot of times, like, I'm stuck in the car and I'm bored and I don't want to listen to anything anymore.
Yeah.
So, like, a lot of times I'll call Justin, and we'll have a good conversation or something,
Yeah, it can be pretty entertaining.
Yeah.
But so my phone rings but vibrates. Mine's on vibrate. So my phone vibrates, but it's a call on a Sunday.
And the call's coming from inside the house.
Yeah. So that's really uncommon. If I'm gonna get a call, it's not gonna be like, even if Vyse wants to hang out, he's not gonna call on the day of unless something weird happened. Usually we would get in touch about that early. So my phone rings and I'm like, what could this possibly be? And it's Minty Mitts, who like never calls me because like we're like, over an hour apart. You guys have been living...
Unless she wants to hook you up with one of her friends.
Yeah, clearly. So, but we don't really generally communicate with each other outside of like Facebook. Like, the only time she would ever contact me by phone is if we're all at a convention and it's like, hey, where are you right now, or something. So like, for her to call me is like really out there. Like, what could this possibly be? Was there like an emergency? Like I can't imagine what this could be that OldManStompy couldn't deal with that I could. Like, what is this?
His beard fell off, and we need somebody to triage.
Yeah, great. But no, it's just really weird, because what could this possibly be that I'm the one you're calling? Of all your New York friends, I'm in New Jersey. What could this possibly be? So I pick up the phone and I'm like, yeah, what's up? And I'm still in my pajamas, and she's like, hey, we're here. And I'm like, what?
The conversation
I'm like,
happened
excuse me?
Exactly like that. What's up? And I'm still in my pajamas.
No, I didn't say that. Like, no, I said, hey, what's up? And by the way, just so the listeners of this podcast know, I was still in my pajamas. So
I am still on my third cup of coffee.
I don't even drink coffee. But so
you could still be on your third.
Throwing
just,
out
like,
my third.
Pour
cup
it
of
into
coffee.
the toilet really slowly. Just
perfect. Take that. So I pick up the phone and she's just like, "Yeah, we're here," and I'm like, "What?" And by the way, it's a good thing Mr. Ryu happens to mention the fruit picking thing, because otherwise I would have had no idea. Like, this would have been out there. It was also kind of funny because I didn't see it until later, but you had started like a group Facebook chat of like, "Hey, does Lotus want to come with us for this fruit picking thing?" And I didn't even see the message until way later, but Mr. Ryu was just like, "No." And you guys apparently came to my place anyway. I was like, all right. So she just goes by. She's like, "We're here." And I'm like, what? So she's like, "Also, could you get like a knife that's capable of cutting fruit?" So I'm like, okay, I guess. But like, could I have a few minutes? Because I didn't mention I needed the change, but I needed to change. And also, I hadn't eaten, even though it was like 12 or 12:30 or something. And so I was like, are we going to get something to eat, or is everyone eaten? Because if everyone's already eaten, you're just going to have to kind of like awkwardly wait either in the driveway or come into the house and awkwardly wait as I just get a quick bite. This is like, So we eventually settled on we could go out somewhere to eat. That was fortunate, but like I was just like, whoa, so I had to like scramble and dress up in the middle of the day like a normal person so I could go outside. So that was just kind of funny.
So yeah, I guess I'll take over from here because I was the chauffeur for this endeavor. So my entry point was actually not that different from Lotus's, where
Really?
where Minty Minty asked me before we went to bed. She told me that her cousins were going pear picking at an orchard in New Jersey, and she asked me if I wanted to go, and I was like, well, I've had a really long week. I'm not sure I want to go on a trip. We can go. We'll see how I feel in the morning. And then I went to bed, and she stayed up pretty late that night playing Final Fantasy XIV with Mr. Ryu and our friend Yan, who lives in Brooklyn. And so I woke up the next morning, and she's like, "So, do you still want to go?" I was like, "I guess so." "I'm not sure. I guess so." And she's like, "Well, then you should put some clothes on because we have to pick you up at the train station in 20 minutes.
Oh, no.
So...
Surprise, you're going.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, so let me pick Yan up at the train station. And she's like, oh, well, then we have to go pick up Mr. Ryu because he's also coming. It's like, oh, okay.
And then we have to pick up Lotus.
Well,
It's like if you're gonna get a mouse a cookie, he's gonna want a glass of milk.
Right. So then we had Mr. Ryu in the car, and he was basically asleep the whole time because he had just come back from Japan.
Oh, he was still
and then
yeah.
I was like, are you sure that he wants to go fruit picking, or do you think he just doesn't know where he is? So then she said, okay, we're gonna go pick up Lotus. I was like, really? Like Lotus wants to go pick fruit? That doesn't sound like...
I had no idea you were coming at all. Mr. Ryu was like, oh, I'm just going with my friends. I'm like, all right,
yeah.
bye.
So I went to, and she's like, don't worry about it. It'll all
Surprised you
work
didn't
out.
show up at my place.
Right?
Well, if it had been on the way, we might have. Actually, my car only has 5 seats, so once we got Lotus, that was it. Unless you wanted
I didn't even know Yan was coming. Like Mr. Ryu said, he was going with you and Minty Mitts. So I see Yan in the car. I'm like, okay, cool, but like, also this is happening because when I picked up the phone, you're like, hi, we're here, and I just hear all you guys talking in the background. I'm like, Yan's also there. All right.
So
like, nobody knows what's going on except for Minty Mitts.
I pulled into your driveway and I was like, did you tell him we're coming? She's like, don't worry about it. And now
I picked up the phone and I'm in my pajamas in my room. Like,
now that I know what actually happened in that phone call, because certainly I didn't hear it. Like, it's actually
that's why you were waiting so long for
funnier
me to come out. Because I wasn't even freaking dressed, and then I had to go like find a knife to cut fruit with. and the funny thing was, she asks for a knife to cut fruit with, and I'm like, oh, okay, everyone's got their knife. But I was the only one who brought a knife at all. None of them were prepared for the freaking orchard trip that they knew about before I did. So I brought the only knife.
Well, I would say that none of us knew that there was an orchard trip except for my wife.
Yeah. But even after you left, though, did she like put you in the car before telling you it was an orchard trip?
We asked Mr. Ryu's parents if we could borrow a knife, and they said no.
Oh yeah, that I did know about. Yeah.
Well, there's a history with like friends of Mr. Ryu asking for a knife in Mr. Ryu's house.
Well, not quite, but close enough.
Okay, so this has happened once where one of our friends came over to Mr. Ryu's house, and he's a weapons collector, and he asked Mr. Ryu's sister if she had any knives, and then she showed him he showed her his collection of throwing knives, and now he is no longer allowed at Mr. Ryu's house.
Yeah, he's not even a bad guy, but like that was a dumb thing to do.
So I've mentioned this before that like as our friends started to like move away from the Princeton area, we got to be really bad at organizing things, and this is evidence of how good we are at organizing get-togethers. We just literally show up at someone's house.
Yep.
It's kind of better sometimes that way.
Yeah.
I'm still wearing my nightcap, like, don't wake daddy. Like, what is this?
So, I will say that there is the other extent, which is where Mr. Ryu and the same friend with the throwing knives drove up on Luminaire's lawn all the way up to his door, blasting the Rickroll song. Like,
yeah, that was
10 years
specifically
ago.
to troll, obviously.
Well, on his lawn, I think that's a little bit beyond trolling.
That is.
Like Luminaire deserved it. Come on.
What?
Well, not like his parents to have their lawn driven over.
Yeah.
No. His parents, Mr. and Mrs. Luminaire, did not.
It's the Luminaire show. Mr. and Mrs. Show did not deserve it.
So would you say the father is maybe the Big Show?
I'm Luminaire. Mr. Show is my dad.
Funny to think of Luminaire's dad as the Big Show. He just looks like a bigger version of Luminaire.
He just laughs at you in the Dungeon of Doom.
So yeah, we went fruit picking, and if I had known that you had no idea really where we were going, I would have had more. I would have understood how the day went along, because we went to this orchard. It's this Korean-owned place, maybe about 20 minutes from us in Hamilton, New Jersey, and they sell Korean pears, which for the uninitiated, they look like apples, but they taste like pears.
Yeah, they're the like yellow apples.
Yeah, they're kind of a delicacy if you go to like an H Mart or whatever the local equivalent is of the Asian supermarket in your area. They're actually pretty expensive. They're like $30 a bunch. So
wow.
They only come in twos. They only come in twos.
Yes, there are pairs of pears. I think Lotus made that joke as to why he shouldn't go, because if he didn't go, then we wouldn't be a pair of pears.
Yeah.
So up to the last, Lotus is trying to get out of this trip.
Well, no, the thing with, like, when you guys showed up at my house, it's not that I didn't know we were going to an orchard, it's that I didn't know I was going. Like, I was like, oh, this must be for the orchard, I guess.
It's your chariot has arrived, Lotus Prince.
Yeah, I guess.
So we went, and so it's a traditional Asian thing, like, you don't waste food, and they enforce that by, like, you can eat anything you want, as long as you pay the entry fee for free. But the rest of the food, anything you take back with you have to pay, and it's actually pretty expensive. But not $30 a bunch. So it was really worth going, except we kept offering Lotus a fruit, and he kept telling us he's not a fruit person and didn't want to eat any. So I was like, why did you come? I didn't realize that you came because we literally drove up to your house and told you to get in the car.
Pretty much. Like, I don't really have an interest in apple picking or pear picking. Like, I was just more of, like, hanging out with you guys.
Yeah, so that was fun. We went to, the rest of the afternoon was pretty mundane. We went to Jimmy John's for lunch and a sushi place near us for dinner. So the pear picking was kind of the centerpiece of the afternoon.
Yeah.
It was also, like, it's unusual to me when I have a gathering that part of my family goes to, even if it's, like, my wife's family, and also my friends. I don't want to specifically say how it went, but Mr. Ryu introduced himself to my wife's cousins, and he did not introduce himself as Mr. Ryu.
By trolling.
He made a scene, and
he just messed around. It didn't really make a scene, but like could have easily made a scene.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
one thing I did forget to mention, by the way, you were saying you can eat the pears on site for nothing. All you have to do is pay the entry fee. For the record, if you're not interested in buying pears to take home, if you just want to gorge yourself on pears, the entry fee is $6, and then you can just eat pears. Like, that's quite a deal.
Mm-hmm. I used to do this with my family. We used to go, like, apple picking at, like, farms in New Jersey, like pumpkin picking. It's not something New Jersey is known for anywhere outside of New Jersey, but there's actually a lot of nice farmland in central Jersey.
Yeah, no, and the funny thing is New Jersey's called the Garden State. You would never know when you're coming in via any method that's not a car, because, like, New Jersey's also a giant highway, and the train ride up and down, it shows you nothing but that.
The highway takes you through, like, Trenton and Newark, which are, like, the big
very
cities
industrial.
In New Jersey.
Yeah. But no, New Jersey has gorgeous places, though, like the Grounds for Sculpture in Hamilton, and one of the apple orchards you were mentioning, it might have been Terhune Orchard, which is this really pleasant, like, apple-picking experience that has, like, horses you can feed and pet, and, like, delicious cider donuts, which I will eat. Those are amazing. So yeah, New Jersey's got some pretty gorgeous scenery if you're not coming out of the airport or off of the train.
It's also got swampland in the Pine Barrens. New Jersey is like surprisingly diverse for such a small state,
and
it doesn't
loads
correlate
of
with
cornfields for days.
Aside from what you get when you get closer to New York, it doesn't look anything like the states around it.
Yeah, but although the funny thing is though, because it's stereotypically known as like a commercial zone,
the Newark state
or a highway. No, I remember my dad had told me there was a Saturday Night Live sketch. Like sometimes Saturday Night Live humor hits a little too close to home, so like only the locals will get it. Like sometimes they've had jokes that are like way too New York specific for like the nation to appreciate. But they had a joke kind of like that for New Jersey that people might get, which was, it was just two people talking, and one of them's like, I'm from New Jersey, and the other's like, oh yeah, I am too. Like, oh wow, which exit? And that's really funny to me. Because the funny thing is, like, where Pyro used to live, and even where I live, like, I'm not exactly like off of an exit, but I could tell you, if you want to get in my general vicinity, I could tell you what my exit is.
Yeah.
Exit 8.
It's actually kind of funny. Like a few weeks ago on the podcast, I talked about how I used to have a fear of driving, and my biggest fear was just getting on Route 1, you know, in New Jersey. And like now that I've gone all the way into Manhattan and driven around Manhattan for a while, like when I'm in Manhattan, all I want to do is get back on the fucking turnpike and get out of Manhattan. And
that's the funny thing with New Jersey is Route 1 is easy mode. It's a straight line. Like the part that scares me is the local roads, because now I actually have to know where I'm going and make weird turns. With Route 1, it's just like just drive. Like just drive for a half an hour and I'm at work. Drive for a half hour. I'm at my friend's house.
The part that scares me is whenever Lotus is on the road, and so am I.
And so are you. What?
Just knowing that he's out there somewhere.
I'm out there. And
turning
I'm not a
around
bad
in
driver.
circles,
I just
not
don't know where
knowing
I'm
where
going
GPS
ever.
is supposed to be pointing him.
So I don't know if you've told the story before on the podcast, but notoriously, whenever Lotus tried to drive to Vyse's house before he moved to his current house, he would always make the wrong turn, like getting off.
Oh yeah, no, because there's an area where you can get off on Route 95, and a Route 295 is very shortly past that. And I forgot what it was. I would always either get off on the exit right before 295 or right after, and I'd have to do like 2 U-turns. I never make that mistake anymore, but the first bunch of times I was driving to Vyse's house, like, I would just keep doing it. It's like, God damn it.
Well, the funny thing is that it's very understandable, because I live in the Philadelphia area, and the 95 exit is labeled Philadelphia. So I understand why you kept doing that.
Yeah.
So, but it was really funny to me because at this time that Lotus was learning to drive to Vyse's house, I was off in Europe, and I was only able to come over to visit once during that time period. And so I knew that Lotus was complaining about how he always goes one exit too far. So this time he was going to go one exit before where his intuition told him to go, and this time it was 2 exits before where he was supposed to get off. So.
No, I was like, great, thanks.
Rather than just remembering the fucking number.
Yeah, right. Get the hell out of here.
It's sorcery, I swear.
Numbers? Come on. This isn't math. This is roads.
Where I come from, we burn people like you with a stake.
A witch?
No, I meant Vyse.
Oh.
Ooh.
So yeah, that was our pear picking adventure. After that, we went to like I said, Mizu Sushi, which is
delicious.
A sushi place pretty close to where all of us live centrally, and also the place where I took my now wife on our first date when we were here in the area next to Princeton, and also where Lotus first pointed out that if my wife, so my last name is Rose, my wife's first name is Lily, and Lotus was the first person to point out that if we got married, her name would be Lily Rose.
Yeah.
And now we are married, and that is her name.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
So
and you got her a bouquet of such.
That was like 4 years before we got married. So Lotus, you were Nostradamus in this scenario.
Nostradamus, yes, that's what happened.
He made a very wide generalization, and it became true.
He said the first thing that came to the top of his head, and it happened to happen 4 years later.
I should blurt out stuff that is potentially socially awkward more often. See if it's prophetic.
You should do it about twice a week on Tuesday and Thursday.
Yes.
So that's our pear picking adventure. I left a bunch for my dad because I know he likes to eat fruit with his like blood pressure medication, so he'll probably appreciate it. And we took the rest home for my wife and her family. We took it over to visit my wife and her family, as like gifts for my mother-in-law. So that was our weekend. So I heard, Vyse, you had a much more interesting general week adventure in Florida. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
So my girlfriend and I went on our first major trip with each other. We've been with each other around like 9 months or so now.
Nice.
And we went on our first like vacation trip away from home kind of thing. You know, she had stayed over, but like, you know, it's always, I think a lot of people mark, you know, that as a monumentous point in a relationship when you both go away together.
Mm-hmm.
You know, to see that's like one of the tests of people's patience is going on a trip and getting along with each other. And we got along fine,
Hey.
just fine. So actually still haven't had a major disagreement in any form. So we just get along. We sync up really well. We're both like half Italian, nerdy people. So I think we just get along well in a lot of aspects. Anyway, so we went down to the Tampa Bay area of Florida, which is on the west coast of the peninsula, and we went to and stayed in a town called Dunedin, which is close to some really nice beaches, and also has a nice little center of town there. And we had a really good time. We did quite a few interesting things. We went to two different museums. We went to the Salvador Dali Museum.
Oh, nice.
Which was really nice. Was
everything melting?
Actually, he had the sequel painting to the one that you're referring to.
Persistence of Memory?
Yeah. It's called the Disintegration of the Persistence of Memory.
Oh, I didn't even know that was a thing. What does that depict?
So it looks like the clocks are melting and kind of the whole landscape is disintegrating into almost like a blocky landscape. It's kind of like going digital, almost like it's not melting; it's disintegrating in a different way.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it's really neat. There were quite a few people who revealed some really neat things about him as well. He believed that very soon that man was going to land on the moon, and he depicted it as such cryptically in one of his paintings. And
nice. You know, actually, that kind of reminds me. I've mentioned this before off the podcast, but not on. But it's long since past the time I've been doing this, but I had been on a Jules Verne kick for a while because I picked up a compilation of 7 of his novels from Barnes & Noble, and one of them was the story From the Earth to the Moon, which the basic premise of that was there's like the ultimate gun club. These are like the biggest gun and cannon enthusiasts you've ever seen, but there's been no wars lately, so they're all bored and kind of out of sorts. So the head of the club was like, hey, what if we make the biggest gun of all and fire a shot at the moon? And people were like, oh shit. So like they eventually turned it into like a capsule. So before spaceships, they basically fired like a spaceship sized bullet kind of toward the moon. But the reason I mention that, there are 2 reasons I mention this. The first is that the narrator, so presumably Jules Verne himself, has an aside where he was like, man, those crazy Americans, I wouldn't be surprised if one day they actually planted a flag on the tallest summit of the moon, which I thought was fascinating because he wrote this in the 1800s, and not the tallest summit, but Americans did do that. And the other thing is, you were mentioning Tampa in Florida. The funny thing is, when they were going to launch the bullet, where do we build this giant cannon to launch the bullet? and they were trying to do all these calculations with astronomers, and they're like, well, the moon's going to be closest to the Earth in its rotation along this line of latitude, and they're like, okay, where can we go that has the highest elevation at this line of latitude? And there were several cities in Texas and one place in Florida, and everyone wanted to be like the famous place, and they decided to go with Florida so they wouldn't choose one city among others in Texas, and Texans would get mad at each other. So like, well, fuck it, let's just do Florida. But the reason I bring this up is they mentioned we could do it in Tampa, Florida. Number one, they called it Tampa Town, because that's what it was called back then. But what was even more amusing was just this blast from the past. They were talking about Tampa, and they're like, you know, Tampa is really the only place in Florida that's worth talking about at all. Everywhere else in Florida is basically just forts to keep away the Indians. And it's just like, holy shit, like... Just imagine that. Like,
times have changed.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, well, what's also kind of funny is that's where Cape Canaveral is, basically, you know. So.
Oh, that does make sense then.
Yeah. So anyway, we had a really good fun time there. Probably one of my favorite ones to look at and analyze was his portrait of Abraham Lincoln. Have you ever seen this?
No.
So he has this portrait of Abraham Lincoln, but it's actually just a bunch of squares. So it's essentially a low resolution photo of Abraham Lincoln. Like if somebody were to make an 8-bit Abraham Lincoln, it'd be kind of like that.
That's you know what that almost makes me think of, because this doesn't seem to be the only time Dolly's pulled something like this, making a picture out of smaller things. Like my first thought, this isn't the same style, but my first thought is that skull. That when you look closer, it's actually made of various nude women, like, posing in such a way that they form a shape.
Sure. Well, what's interesting about this one is you know that it's a picture of Abraham Lincoln, but it's not even really close to a picture of Abraham Lincoln. And I think that was what the interesting part was. It's such a low resolution that it doesn't even really look like Abraham Lincoln. But your first instinct is to say, "Oh wait, no, that's a picture of Abraham Lincoln."
Interesting.
So his it's funny because he made that painting in such a way that he had studied through books in psychology that we could piece together something else at a very low resolution he basically made it at the lowest resolution he could until you couldn't discern it.
That's clever.
You can actually tell that it's Abraham Lincoln, but only just barely. And it's to the point where people would be like, is that a portrait of him? And people would be like, oh, it has to be. And it is.
That's interesting.
So yeah, it's at such a low resolution that it's barely a picture of him, but that's the point. It's that our brains fill in a lot of missing information, given a low amount of information.
Well, yeah, it's like if you played Mega Man 8 first, and then you played Mega Man 1, and you're like, yep, that's him.
Yeah. It's just really interesting. You should take a look at it, because it's only like 16 blocks of different colors. I mean,
oh, wow.
Yeah, it's very low. And so I really like that one, and it also has some other stuff going on in the painting that I won't get into, but there's plenty of really interesting stuff there. And we also went to the Chihuly Museum. I don't know if you guys know who Chihuly is.
I'm afraid not.
But he's a famous glass blower.
Okay.
And he is still living, and he made a lot of really famous glass sculptures in the world, and he's made several for casinos in New Jersey, like several chandeliers and things like that.
But was
he's
this
just
person,
a really cool guy.
I'm just curious, was this person Italian, or was this actually like an American glassblower?
He's an American who came out of Michigan.
Wow. Okay,
Yeah,
I just picture Italy.
no
when I
accent
picture
or
glass
anything.
blowing. What's that?
Yeah, no accent or anything. And the funny, he had actually trained in Venice.
There you go. There it is.
He had trained in Venice, but like that wasn't the start of him, blowing glass. I'm
Sure.
assuming. I'm sure he did it a bit at home.
Yeah.
But he did learn. He did learn in Venice. Anyway, really cool. He's actually like a really laid back artist. He isn't like really full of himself. So like I saw like in the documentary they were showing, he just was like, just put that around there and see if it looks good. It's just like really funny. But somehow he always makes it work. You know, maybe he just randomly places things and then knows that it looks right after a while. But
no, I know that feeling.
It's
like
kind of funny.
You could break it down to a formula, but like, you know, it's kind of like how I am with like grammar or with like music. Like, do you know what the meter means? Do you know what the 3/4 means? Like, I was told, but I forgot, but I kind of know how fast it should be. Or like again with grammar, can I look up the rule? Yeah, but that just doesn't sound right, which is why I'm changing it, you know?
Exactly. So he makes it look appealing to the average person's eye, which was really neat. What else did we do? We also saw somebody do some glass blowing after that because we kind of they were doing a demonstration. Somebody was making pumpkins
Nice.
at a glass furnace, so it was really neat.
Glumpkins.
What's that?
Glumpkins.
Yes, Glumpkins.
So
we ate at a lot of really nice restaurants while we were down there. I'm trying to think of other things that we did. Have you guys ever heard of the movie Dolphin Tale? It was like a kids movie a few years ago.
I think I've heard the name, but I don't know anything about it.
So it was a movie about a dolphin that was rescued in the wild that had its tail fell off because it had gotten caught in a rope.
Jeez.
And then they rescued the dolphin, and then after a while, after a few days after it being in captivity, the injury was so severe that the tail fell off. And the movie is about them fitting the dolphin with a prosthetic tail.
Interesting.
neat.
So we went to the we went to the aquarium in which that dolphin is kept.
Oh.
And so the aim of the aquarium is actually to rehab injured marine life and then introduce them to the wild. However, there are some animals that just will not survive outside in the wild. So they basically have to become permanent residents. And this particular dolphin needs to be a permanent resident.
Yeah.
It has no hunting skills. It never learned how to hunt from adults because it was a young dolphin when it got injured. So there were three dolphins there, a male and two females. It was particularly fun to see them. There's a couple also basically paraplegic turtles, sea turtles that were there that were really kind of neat to see. See them actually, have a place to stay so they don't get, killed out in the wild. So it was pretty neat. Got to feed some or touch some stingrays and things like that. So
Nice.
it was a good time. We spent a lot of time at beaches, which is a good thing to do down there. The water's still very, very, very nice. It's like going in bath water right now. We went to a place called Clearwater where the name wasn't just a funny name. The water was clear. Had a really good time there. And one thing in particular that was a lot of fun was we went on a couple different boardwalks down there, and they're not similar to New Jersey boardwalks, but they did have some shops and things there. One thing that they had at one of the docks in the Gulf there was jet ski rides. Yeah, you could rent a jet ski for about an hour or so, and so my girlfriend and I went tandem on a wave runner, and we went out into the ocean, into the Gulf, and it was a lot of fun. My girlfriend was apprehensive at first, but I kind of talked her into it.
Nice.
And I'm usually very planned on what I do, and so is she. So I kind of wanted to do something spur of the moment, just to be kind of romantic. So it was really great because we ended up getting out there, and we ended up getting really close to a school of dolphins.
Oh, nice.
So she got she got to see we got to see the dolphins, and they were all showing off, in front of the jet skis and stuff. It was really
that's
neat.
really cool. So you might say school was in session.
No, don't say that.
Okay, I won't.
Too late.
I'm finished
Vyse is
with
dead.
that joke.
Well, we sure had a great show today.
Yeah, follow me on the YouTube channel.
But I guess the elephant in the room is that did I get away from Hurricane Irma? And yes, I did. In fact, Irma didn't hit until Sunday, and we had left by Wednesday. So that was a sigh of relief. However, my girlfriend's parents were down there visiting family friends, and didn't have their plane ticket until this weekend. So they got delayed, and we were worried about that for a while. But it turns out by the time Irma had gotten to the Tampa area, it had petered out quite a bit. Though still quite a bit of Florida did get hit very badly. And my heart goes out to anybody who knows anybody down there, particularly in the Keys and in Miami, and now Jackson is having some major threats of large flooding. So
yeah, if I'm not mistaken, there was a large portion of eastern Florida that wasn't expecting by any of the forecasts to get hit by the hurricane at all, and turned out to get ravaged by it during its last surge.
Yes. Yeah. The eastern part of Florida hardly ever gets hit just because of the way that the winds usually go, and usually the winds kind of carry the, and also the way that the islands are lined up, it kind of makes kind of a barrier and kind of shoves the storms usually up, and usually only coastal regions of the eastern part of Florida get hit, and this time was basically the whole state got hit, which is very unusual, unusual. And Florida is a gigantic state. I don't know if you guys have ever driven through it, but it is huge. It is a lot bigger than you think it is.
Yeah, actually, when I was in ninth grade, we lived near Miami for a year, a place called actually closer to Fort Lauderdale, and we drove. When we moved back to New Jersey, my dad and I, from that area all the way up to all the way up to Queens in New York City.
That's ridiculous. That must have taken days.
It's about a 21-hour drive.
Yeah, I was gonna say it took 21 hours from New Brunswick to get down to Key West, back in college, and I remember distinctly half of the trip being all of the other states, and the other half getting through Florida to get to Key West.
That is true. When we go to Otakon, we're out of New Jersey in an hour. We pass through Delaware for 5 minutes. It's just kind of go.
They're all lengthwise pretty easy to get through.
If you're not stopping, it's not a very exciting trip at all either, except for the constant billboards for south of the border. Which is which is this really tacky Mexican themed amusement park that's on the border between North Carolina and South Carolina.
Also, not very culturally sensitive.
No, not at all.
Also, have probably the worst bathrooms you'll ever be in. But you can get fireworks there. So anyway,
that's a thing. Fireworks, you cannot just go to the store and buy fireworks in New Jersey. They're not sold here.
So this was actually a thing back last year when I lived out in Chicago, where you can buy fireworks legally in Indiana, but not in Illinois. And of course, Chicago is right on the border between Illinois and Indiana. But when it got close to the 4th of July, if you drove over the border, there were stores that sold to that market. You could very easily drive over the border into Indiana and buy fireworks. But if you turned around and drove right back, the cops knew that people would be doing this, and they would just stop you. So they would stop any car that looked like it was coming right back from the shopping centers across the border in Illinois. So you were advised to drive back into Indiana for a while and drive around for a few hours and then come back out on 81 into Illinois.
So this is a very common thing in New Jersey that happens every year around the 4th of July, is these fireworks stores called Sky King pop up in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Now, Here's the thing. There is a law that says Pennsylvanians cannot buy fireworks in the state of Pennsylvania. However, they are trying to sell to people from New Jersey. So you literally, in order to buy fireworks in Pennsylvania at one of these Sky King places, you need to have a New Jersey driver's license, essentially.
That's so funny.
So they market themselves right across from bridges, in bridge towns and things like that, like right across there, because they know that they basically can only sell to people from New Jersey. And people, and the same kind of thing happens. Cops are waiting right outside of these bridge towns to, when you go back to New Jersey, just waiting for you to bring highly illegal fireworks back into the state, where they'll basically just confiscate it.
Yeah, in New Jersey, the only time you hear fireworks is when it's like a public event, like at the county park, where it's like sanctioned fireworks, but like you and your buddies, there's no way that you're getting away with it.
Yeah, I used to do this kind of thing when I was in high school and middle school, because I really loved fireworks at the time. I was like fascinated by it, and it was something that I did with all my friends. We used to go to other states to pick some stuff up, and then eventually my dad took me to one of these Sky King places, and they have like everything you could ever want, because there's no restrictions on selling something under a legal loophole, right?
Yeah.
So like they sell you mortars, which are like, are like the big time stuff. They're what you see at a 4th of July event. Mm-hmm. So like essentially something that you put in a PVC pipe and it shoots up and explodes. And I bought a ton of these things because they're actually not all that expensive. You could buy with $200, you can buy a ton of fireworks, which is what my dad did for me. He was just like, okay, I'm buying this for your birthday. I got $200, and you can get whatever you want. So I got a ton of fireworks. I haven't gone through that fireworks in over 10 years. Like I there's still fireworks from that batch lying around from 15 years ago.
Huh.
This was actually one of the when I told the whole story about the broken Matt Hardy saga, that like really goofy thing in
Brother
the Hardy Boys.
Nero.
So one of the signature moments was actually a filmed segment they had on their little estate in North Carolina, where Matt's wandering around his backyard looking for Jeff because they're having a match at their like ancestral home. And he's got this like affected British accent, but he's actually like a hick from North Carolina, like in real life. So he's walking around his backyard and he finds his boat, and he's like, "Behold, a dilapidated boat." and Jeff pops up from behind the boat carrying a mortar and starts shooting fireworks at him. And Matt drops the affectation. He's like, "Oh shit!" and just runs away.
That's great. I've mentioned this before, but my favorite breaking character moment was the first time he started becoming that weird megalomaniac. And he's like, "We will meet in our ancestral plane." And so he's going to the barn where they're going to have the match, and just his gardener is just chilling on the outside like, "So, does everything look okay, Matt?" And he's just like, "Yeah." And then he just kind of keeps going and gets back into character. It was great.
So, true story, that's his father-in-law.
Nice.
Nice. So, the only other thing I wanted to say about the trip, other than, I had a really good time, and we went to a lot of really nice places. Afterwards, I kind of got into the cooking bug. My sister-in-law had gotten an extra shipment from HelloFresh, which is kind of like Blue Apron, if you guys have ever heard of Blue Apron.
Yeah.
Yep.
For anybody who doesn't know, it's essentially a food service that gives you just enough ingredients to cook a 2-person meal. So they give you it makes it really easy because you don't have to, buy large quantities of something that you only need to cook for. And kind of got into the cooking bug. Yesterday I made pork tenderloin de l'orange for my girlfriend. It was very good, very tasty. But I had Monterey Jack cheeseburgers tonight, which were really, really good. It was with garlic aioli and caramelized onion jam on top.
God damn.
Wow.
It was bitchin'. I do like the idea of these things, but I don't know whether I would like to order it every single week. Some people like swear by it and just do it every single week. But I don't know whether I'd be able to cook for myself 3 times a week,
Well,
depending on
my
my work schedule
not only
and things
that,
like that.
but if it's so good, you might want to hold off on ordering it anyway, so it remains special whenever it does come.
Yeah, and it's also one of those things where it's just like, okay, well, now that I know what's in that recipe, like I effectively know how to cook the hamburgers that they had sent me. Like, I know all the ingredients, so I'll just pick them up now. I don't need to be in a service to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of just introduces you to things you like.
Your next level of grill master.
I'm sure it's really good for some folks that don't like to go grocery shopping and things like that, but I actually think it's kind of wasteful because it's a lot of packaging for each individual ingredient, and that's kind of where you save on waste. When you go and you don't have a perfectly measured packet of oregano, you get like a big bottle of oregano, right? And you use it in future things. Oregano lasts forever.
You import it all the way from Oregon.
That's a new laugh from Vyse. I'm gonna add it to my documentation of things that Vyse has said in response to Lotus's awful puns.
Just like a non-spit take.
Yeah.
Like you don't even deserve my froth.
Wow.
My froth. Anyway, the hamburgers were so delicious I ate 2 of them.
Hey.
They were really
Oh,
they were really good.
I am kind of curious about this. I did speak to while I was interviewing for programming jobs, some of the people who work for Blue Apron while I was interviewing, and I'm kind of curious about this wastefulness thing, because to me it does feel like, maybe you don't do this, but I bet there is a lot of food wasted just by people buying the wrong amount of something to cook and throwing it out. So like, I'm curious whether or not that changes when you have a delivery which is exactly the right amount that you need, and whether that has been any investigation to like possibly reusing the packages or how recyclable they are. I'm curious about this as someone in the software industry in this kind of economy. Like, this is something that we have to work on. It has to be renewable, or else it's not a sustainable practice.
Well, think about it this way. When left to my own devices and I cook on the weekend for the rest of the week, I cook usually like a big package of chicken.
Yep.
I don't mind eating chicken for a lot of the meals that are coming up because it's a good, quick thing. It's also easy to heat up, and you can do a lot of different things with chicken, right? So you have like a 2-pound thing of chicken, and you could be feeding your whole family for 2-3 nights, and also lunches, just on that packaging alone, right? Whereas something from Hello Grow, they give you a package of 2 chicken breasts, and that's it. And then a package of the meat for hamburgers.
Right.
And then a package of, like 2 pork tenderloins. So you have 3 bits of plastic rather than the 1 bit of plastic. And you, of course, know how cells function, or anything with surface area, right? The more surface area that you have on something, the less waste there is.
Sure.
So you have all these little packages, and it adds up to be a lot more plastic. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand the point. I'm just thinking about whether or not that's offset by less food waste and less purchase and fewer purchases.
Yeah, I think a lot of that comes down to like careful planning. Maybe some people just aren't very good at it,
Right.
Which is understandable, and also sometimes you can't help it. Well.
I was thinking like there's the the long-standing joke that like hot dog buns and hot dogs come in packages that don't sync up well with each other, and it's designed that way that you don't have the right amount of food and you have to go buy more, like all the time. So like planning doesn't always mitigate this unless you have people who are happy to eat buns with something else in them besides a hot dog, And like people
You're
aren't
right.
always that fortunate, so like sometimes it happens, as opposed to these services where you always get exactly the right amount to make your meal and nothing more.
I was also thinking of the fact that it basically comes in a makeshift cooler every time.
Okay.
Like, you know, so it comes, like, it's basically a disposable cooler.
Right.
It has, like, an two ice packs and, you know, like insulation in it, and you can't keep that every single time. Like maybe you could keep one of the ice packs.
That makes sense to me. I mean, that makes sense to me as like problematic and wasteful. It's not like the clothing services that work in a similar way, where you reuse the box and send the clothes that you don't use back to the company. Like you can't really reuse a cooler that had food in it.
Yeah,
or you
exactly.
wouldn't want to, and it would probably be really expensive for the company to clean it and repackage it. So it's probably pretty.
No, it's made for the for people to dispose of it.
Yeah.
So I guess the moral of the story is I like it. I like the ingredients and I like the different dishes because there's things I wouldn't have thought to make that that onion jam that I put on there. Now I will. Now you know that'll probably be a staple in my cooking now because it was that good. To be very honest, it was balsamic and it was just really good. And it worked really well on a hamburger. But I don't know. I don't think in the long term I'm gonna continue to do that kind of thing. So anyway, I just wanted to go over that real quick because it was something I was interested in, and I wouldn't have any other way to express it otherwise. Did either of you guys want to say anything else?
No, I mean, I think I've pretty much used up like what our adventures were for the weekend.
Yeah, we went pear picking. That was
a good. Yeah, we had a good pair of anecdotes.
We sure picked a lot of pears this week.
Picked a prickly pear. Anyway,
he's trying to do the bare necessities from the Jungle Book, and I think it's not quite coming out for the. just watch the movie. Britches. It's better.
Anyway, that is the show for this week. Please remember to subscribe to the Corrective Consciousness YouTube and SoundCloud pages. While there, please give us thumbs up, likes, and 5-star ratings on iTunes. It always helps me to get various ribs, so I know that you guys are paying attention to me. So please make fun of me on all of our various media. It helps us spread awareness of the show and helps keep me going. You can also catch us on Tuesday on our sister podcast, Corrective Consciousness, the podcast about our lives and love of pop culture. Finally, you can friend me as VyseTheBold on Steam, PSN, Xbox Live, and Twitter.
And you can follow me on my YouTube channel, Lotus Prince. You can hit me up on Twitter at Lotus Prince. And finally, if you're interested in seeing my videos early, or getting in on exclusive live streams, or even selecting upcoming games for me to Let's Play, then please consider swinging by my Patreon, which can be found at patreon.com/LotusPrince.
And you can find me as OldManStompy on most major social media and gaming networks, except for Steam, where I prefer not to be found because I don't like it when people know when I'm playing video games.
It is kind of weird to me. Like,
yeah, I never allowed my student when I was still working in physics to friend me on Steam because I didn't want him to have that excuse that he could play video games if I was playing video games, and I wanted to be able to play a lot of video games.
Oh, I don't know. With me, it's just kind of like I log on to Steam because I'm not always logged on. So I'll log on to Steam and I'll play something, and then I'll get a message like, "Hey, I see you're on," and I'm like, "Yeah, but I don't."
Aren't we just Mr. Popular? Maybe you shouldn't tell everybody at the end of the podcast where to find you, and you wouldn't have to deal with this problem.
I didn't tell them to find me on Steam.
well, now they know that they can.
I mean, okay, but I have like 10 friends on Steam, and I never talk to them on there because I know them elsewhere.
I don't even think I'm friends with you on Steam.
We may not be, actually. OldManStompy, I think you're friends with me because you've seen my Isaac stuff, so you're watching me play video games.
Yes, I've been stalking him playing Binding of Isaac while just cursing the sky that he was so far ahead of me at platinuming Afterbirth Plus.
Yeah, but that's okay. You beat me to platinuming, I think, Vanilla Rebirth.
Yes. Yeah. And I am, in fact, I'm checking now, I am, in fact, friends with VyseTheBold, VyseTheBold, on Steam.
On Steam and nothing else.
That's how you spell it.
Yeah.
I should have let everybody know. Anyway,
and you can also find Pyro Jack Frost as that. I don't know, a bunch of places.
As that.
Near Fukushima.
Yeah.
That's still funny 2 days later.
You mean about an hour. Anyway.
Yeah, right.
Don't give it away.
You're destroying the magic.
Like, we don't openly tell, reference the fact that we do these one after the other every single time. It's not obvious that we have the same people on for both every single week.
You know, like every once in a while on my YouTube channel, I make some behind the scenes videos. Like I've gone into like the Rhea for the Saturn, for example. One of my behind the scenes videos now, it's gonna be like 10 seconds long, and I'll be like, hey, you know that podcast we do? It's on Sunday or Monday night, and we do one podcast after the other, and that's the whole video. It's like, what an asshole. Thanks for wasting my time.
Yeah.
There's a specific episode of the Undertale LP where we had to re-record the entire thing in post.
Oh god.
And we actually did a really good job of it, except at the very end where Mitz and I are just like, wow, we did a really good job. No one can tell this is post commentary.
Yeah. I just totally forgot to hit the record button for the commentary. And we recorded for like 20. It was a bit of a shorter installment, thank God. It was like 20 minutes or 25.
What fucking idiot would start recording something and just forget to hit the record button?
Yeah, oh, the irony.
So obviously I forgot to do this at the start of today's podcast.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it was the Evangelion of our podcast.
This is the rebuild of Reactive Consciousness 2.0.
And now it's time to end the podcast. So I guess you could call that the third impact.
the end of Reactive Consciousness.
Yeah, where there's like a giant, one of our giant heads in the background, and we don't know what it means.
And Lotus is choking me while I'm on the ground.
Congratulations!
And he has two different color eyes for some reason.
What the hell? Just get in the headphones, Shinji. I mean, Vyse.
You know, the fourth movie might come out before Kingdom Hearts 3 someday.
Yeah.
The third movie took way too long to come out in English. Jesus. Mm-hmm. It took like a year and a half long, or like 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, and the fourth one still isn't out. I guess because I think he's directing the new Godzilla. He directed a Godzilla
movie. Oh. Yeah, Shin Godzilla apparently was fantastic.
More like Shinji Godzilla.
No,
kinda.
No.
Oh, sorry.
It actually has some references. Anyway,
I think we're done here.
We are done. We'll catch you on Tuesday.
Until next time, everyone.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.